Hi, this is Anson Williams, and you're listening to the amazing TV Confidential.
Dragnet. Ladies and gentlemen, the story you are about to hear is true. The names have been changed to protect the innocent. You're a detective sergeant. You're assigned to Bunko Fugitive Detail. A pawnbroker tells you he suspects a swindle. He isn't sure. Your job? Check it out.
Ed Robertson, welcome you back to TV Confidential, radio talk show about television. Tony Figueroa is here with us for the hour, along with her friend Joseph Dougherty, Emmy Award-winning writer, producer, director of such shows as 30-something, which is now available as a brand new box set through our friends at Shout Factory. 30-something, Judging Amy, Once and Again, Saving Grace, and currently Pretty Little Liars, or PLL, Pretty Little Liars. Pretty Little Liars, which will be coming back in January on ABC Family. Joe, always good to have you in the program.
Thank you. Always good to be here.
It is an honor because you're a working producer. It's very difficult to get a working producer to do any sort of interview because you're busy.
Makes you think how much work I actually do. They're running around the office right now going, "Where's Joe? We can't find him." Move that paperclip immediately.
But always good to have you on the program. Also with us tonight is our friend Dan Farren. Dan Farren, writer and performer, who has authored several one-man shows. He's also performed stand-up all over Southern California. And like Tony, Dan is one of the producers of Story Salon, Southern California's longest-running, regularly performing live storytelling ensemble, which celebrates its 20th year.
Wow, that was very nice. Thank you very much. It was nice to be here, but thank you. That was a wonderful introduction.
You left off registered trademark, but other than that, you got it.
It is a registered trademark, and they perform live shows every Wednesday evening and occasionally other nights of the week at the Art Parlor in Valley Village, and they've also. Many of your contributors have released books.
Oh yeah, books and shows and CDs and everything. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing the output over the last 20 years of a lot of people have just come in. You come in, you do one or two stories, all of a sudden I got an hour.
And from that comes another story. And of course, a lot of the books and CDs that have come from Story Salon are available one way or another, or at least how you can find them is available through the new Story Salon website at storysalon.com, which Tony had a direct hand in.
Yeah, it looks wonderful, by the way. It really does.
How long is it going to take?
And we're also on Facebook, too, so if you want to join us there, you
Facebook.com/Story Salon.
Very good. My goodness.
Some of our TV Confidential guests have been brought over directly from Story Salon. Everyone from Hank Garrett, especially, and several others, and a few others that we're trying to lure from Story Salon.
Yes, we are working on that. We're going to talk about Dragnet, specifically the original Dragnet by Jack Webb, but I want to ask Joe to explain what we're going to do, because this is Joe's idea, and it's going to sound better coming from you because you're a producer.
I suppose you're wondering why I called you all here today. Specifically, and thank you for this opportunity, because I'm trying to work this out. When I was a kid, I had the impression of Dragnet that a lot of people had, which was only of the late 60s, early 70s version, which was a show that kind of stood on the wrong side of a widening gap between how television drama used to be done and how it was depicted and what it was evolving into. So I didn't take it very seriously. It seemed to me a rather inexpensively produced show that was shot very quickly and seemed to have a rather conservative point of view, and I did not think very much about it. And then I got called for jury duty. And I was driving downtown, and I turned on the satellite radio, and it was the Radio Classics channel, and they were just starting to play a half-hour episode of the radio version of Dragnet from the early 50s. And I said, well, this will take exactly half an hour for me to get downtown. Let me listen to this. And what I heard was, to my ears, revelatory. It was so not what I remembered from the 60s incarnation. It was gritty. It was intelligent. It was impeccably produced. It was full of detail. It was dark and visceral. And even though you knew it was fiction, it seemed to have a kind of verisimilitude that I found amazing. And that started me going back and listening to more and more of the radio shows and trying to get a little bit more understanding how this came about, and then looking at the first couple of years of the black and white show. And I just realized that what Jack Webb, who was a minor actor and a guy trying to get an acting career self-powered by creating shows for himself, kind of had his antennas open in the 40s and 50s, had a good time working with the LAPD, had a good time working in crime dramas, did a hard-boiled radio show for himself, which if you've ever heard it, is so hard-boiled you can't crack the shell. And from that to go to this low-key, what must have been very strangely innovative at the time. And when you look at contemporary stuff, people do respond to it as being, this is like nothing else. It's become a cliche, but only because it's been around so long. And I guess I wanted to just kind of talk about how Dragnet went from being this tremendously innovative thing to something that's unfortunately not taken as seriously as it probably should be.
Right.
I know I've gone back to look at the 60s ones now to try and understand what I may have missed. And now my little meter is leaning a little bit more towards Jack's side to try and understand what he was going for. So I'm kind of reevaluating that. But if nothing else, I think it should be stated quite clearly that the modern police procedural is directly linked to Jack Webb.
Right, because it is two detectives sifting through the evidence with, and in the course of 30 minutes or several days, compartmentalizing the 30 minutes, finding, piecing together the evidence and apprehending the guilty party.
Sometimes,
not always.
Yeah, not always. The radio shows and the early black and white television shows are very serious. There are one or two in there which have lighter touches, but I've now heard a couple of radio shows where they've put disclaimers on the front of them, which is basically, this is a program for you, not your children. George Fenneman would just warn you about that. And they would do stories, child kidnapping, child murder, and always with the working class hero, the working stiff cops. As Joe Friday tells more than one person, I make $338 a month, no time and a half. And they also, I think, Gene Roddenberry applied some Jack Webb rules to Star Trek in terms of nomenclature, in that you don't have to explain things as long as it sounds like the characters know what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. So Webb's Joe Friday, who narrates all these shows, uses a lot of police nomenclature and never explains it. There are numbers, there are room numbers, there are places, there's a specificity. He must have wanted it to be very specific because he thought specificity would convince the people it's real. That's why episodes begin with the date, the time, and the weather conditions in Los Angeles. Every episode that I've heard basically said it was Tuesday, November 3rd. It was foggy in Los Angeles. It was warm in Los Angeles. It was raining in Los Angeles. You just get this right off of his. He was a good actor. This is a guy who's, he directed every episode, but also, you can catch him as a wise guy in Sunset Boulevard and a couple other films. But it was just kind of a middling career. If you go back, you find out he's got one of those interesting pasts. Never knew his father. Had a kind of guarded, kind of cared for childhood. Signed up for the service, washed out as a flyer, and just I believe it is. My understanding of it is basically he kind of was working on a couple of pictures. He made contact with somebody who was working in the police department. I think it was Parker was the chief at the time.
Yeah.
And that there was access to files. Did he want to do it? He created the show for himself and made this decision that it would have this kind of atonality.
Yeah, and you mentioned that one of the trademarks was he would have, we had an 854, whatever the police code was, and he acknowledged that the typical viewer may not know what an 854 is right off the bat, but they'll accept it because it is a sense of authenticity. That is what police code, just as if you were to read a war story. The Army has their own language. You may not know what a specific term. You may not recognize what it means right away. But if you hear it enough times, you know that is part of the life of a police officer. And if you listen to the show or watch the show on a week-in, week-out basis, you will figure out through context what they are talking about.
It's all about context. It goes all, which is that. Let's talk about emergency. Everybody say it with me now. Stabilize and move. Start a drip of Ringer's lactate and D5W.
Wow, that was
going to say Julie London.
When Julie London tells you to start a drip of Ringer's lactate with D5W, you do it.
Well, they were smart enough to figure that the audience was bright enough to figure out what it was.
Yeah.
That's what it is. I mean, we're going to present it. Oh, that must be this or whatever that. I also loved the fact he always identified what division he was working out of.
Yeah.
And what floor it was on.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
who the boss was. And when I got to the office and what was the number of the office.
It's like what he was doing is he was writing his report, and that's basically it was the header to his report about that's what I did today. That was what I did.
We're taking a look at the original Dragnet and the career of Jack Webb in general, along with Joseph Dougherty and Dan Farren. To hear the rest of this conversation, please visit our archives page at podcast.tvconfidential.net.